Hello, welcome. Hopefully, we can give you something to liven up your night. Footballguys.com, Thursday night hangout. And when the Cecil and the Gene are away, the Sigmund and the Matt will play. And Gene is actually on assignment for the rest of the year, rest of the season, as far as the video shows go. So Sunday mornings will also be Matt Waldman and I frolicking, and who knows where it will lead. And what are the odds, Matt, that one of us will say something that will go down in audible lore, or something we'll have to walk back, or something that we'll realize, like, whoa, we got a little carried away there.
I got one to start.
Oh,
On
good.
Twitter just now, I was, we were looking at the sidelines and seeing
Yeah.
Paxton Lynch in their white little sweatsuits.
Yeah.
Is it me, or is Paxton Lynch and that guy next to him, the blonde haired guy, look like a reunion tour of a boy band that my daughter would have gone to, to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he kind of does have that boy band thing going on.
Yeah.
So.
It absolutely. And the boy bands and quarterbacks, I have to wonder, I think that if it looks like your quarterback belongs in a boy band, that's probably a bad thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It just depends. I mean, Russell Wilson probably could have been in a boy band. He seems to be okay.
Russell Wilson actually he hosted like a Nickelodeon award ceremony, right?
See, there you go. So
so I guess it's not a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, but he's the exception to every rule.
So this is a good sign of how boring this game is. But let's talk about the game.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one thing that's kind of interesting that jumps off the page to me is, the difference between Frank Gore and Marlon Mack. Still, when you watch this game, I mean, they both had a wind-back play, and you could see the difference between an athlete and a craftsman. And Mac certainly, he got what was there, I guess, and there wasn't much there on a wind back, and he just showed that he didn't really understand how to press a crease. And you watch Frank Gore do it, and it's like watching a master, and he nearly earns a first down on the same type of a play call. So, for people who were calling for Marlon Mack at mid-year, because of some of the exciting plays, you can kind of walk that back a little bit and go, hey, he's got a little bit more to learn. And there's a reason why they're giving the ball to Frank Gore as much as that they are. But, when you watch this game, I mean, certainly Trevor Siemian getting hurting his shoulder, and then Brock Osweiler coming in, and, there was a touchdown pass called back that was to Devontae Booker, where he hurdled a man up the sideline. And Booker's looked pretty good so far with some of his movement and his ability to make people miss, but this team, earlier Siemian threw an interception that, with this wonderful, the best thing about this game is the end zone view.
Yes. Did you see that they showed how there's two people, actually, one person that controls the camera and one person that does the actual apparatus that moves the camera. So it's actually the combination of two minds creating that, which is pretty cool.
Thank God we're not doing that.
Yeah, right. But you really see, I mean, you can see the beauty of some of the decisions and the way the game comes together like ballet, and then you see the ugliness of Trevor Siemian's decision and a bad decision, a bad throw. Just, I guess that was the beauty of that one. But from a fantasy perspective, you're probably staying away from Jack Doyle. Actually was, I think, someone that looked like one of the better tight ends you could play this week outside of the top 8. He's not necessarily coming through. On the Colts side, there's not much, but they're doing enough that the Denver defense everyone liked isn't coming through. Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders doing what you would expect, maybe on their way to catching 6 or 7 balls for 70 or 80 yards. Not going to win your week for you, but holding serve, a par. And I'm surprised at how good Frank Gore looks, considering he carried the ball 36 times.
Yeah, but of course now he's got a quad and a knee, and they're saying his return's unknown.
So
yeah, we'll see how that works out. But if he comes back, then maybe the Colts will have a slight edge. And right now, well, guess what? He's in the game. So
of course he's in my home game. But not a lot of Week 15 fantasy semifinal fireworks in this one. I like that you mentioned the idea of evaluating players for the future too. That's something that we like looking at in the last 3 weeks of the season. And week 17, please don't play your Super Bowl in week 17 in fantasy leagues. But watching players, often that week 17 performance is the first hint. Tyrell Williams had the 80-yard touchdown against Denver in his rookie year as a hint that maybe there was more there. Willie Parker was a week 17 wonder.
Arian Foster.
After he fumbled in week 15 and lost a matchup for me. Thank you, Arian Foster. But so tonight, of course, Dr. Gene Brammel's injury content at footballguys.com for subscribers, and he'll be tweeting stuff out. And we're not going to spend the time going around the horn with the injuries, but no, he's going to have you covered. And when we come back on Sunday, we won't either. So we're going to just focus more on decisions that you're going to have to make. And I want to solicit from our wonderful chat room questions, burning questions. We can always use these as jumping off points to larger discussions. And we'll start out with Ben Wynn. Hey, Ben. Hey, everyone out there. Hey, Wendell.
Hey, Ben.
Hey, Gina. Hey, Sincere Taylor. And we love football. Sincere Taylor says, damn, he loves Thursdays and Sundays with Football Guys family. And we love time with our family.
Catch you, brother.
Absolutely, folks. So, and Gina Carter says, is that a country song? Boy bands and quarterbacks. It's America. And boy bands and quarterbacks. That's who I want my daughter to date.
Or Western icons,
Yeah.
Western guys who look like cowboys.
Yeah, exactly. Where's Terry Bradshaw? He had a country music career.
Carson Wentz looked like he could have been a cowboy.
Yeah. Jimmy Garoppolo or Phillip Rivers from Ben Wynn?
That's a great question, because when you look at how Phillip Rivers has played as of late, you look at the sheer number of targets that he has in terms of guys who are viable and he can spread the ball around, and that defense is playing better. And you'd think that's probably the better play. But Garoppolo is an interesting matchup because Tennessee is not a great pass defense, and Garoppolo has played extremely well. I'm sold on Jimmy Garoppolo, and that's a first, because I've spent 2 years making fun of him, for some of his behaviors in the pocket. But he's proven to me that he's willing to stand in there, and that some of the things that I saw aren't going to turn into major problems unless he gets hit an awful lot over the course of next season and he regresses. But he's aggressive. He gets rid of the ball quick. He reads the field well. He moves well, and he anticipates that space he has in the pocket with quiet feet, the ability to just kind of play efficiently within compressed areas and deliver the ball with power. So I like what he has available there, but I still have to give it to Rivers, because in a divisional matchup with a secondary that hasn't been playing well as of late, and with this offense, with the Chiefs offense looking like they're turning things around, this could be a shootout. And I think that with that in mind, Phillip Rivers is the more likely quarterback to end up with a 400-yard day. Whereas with Garoppolo, you're probably going to get somewhere between 250 to 280, and maybe he'll get a touchdown. But he's still learning this offense. They're still trying to expand it. And when you've got a player like Rivers who kind of is the master of this offense with all the weapons he has around him, that's hard to pass up.
Yeah, it is. I have Rivers as my number 9 quarterback this week. Garoppolo is somewhere in that 15, 18 range. Where do I have him exactly? I think 20. But that being said, I like how you're saying that you're sold on Garoppolo. I think it makes it really exciting to look forward to next year for San Francisco. I'm even going back in some of my dynasty leagues, Matt, and picking Joe Williams back up where he's been dropped, because this is looking like an offense that's going to be a good offense. Carlos Hyde's going to be a free agent. I don't think Matt Breida has done anything to distinguish himself, and they've still got Joe Williams, and they've got Jeremy McNichols called up too. Buy low, sell high has been all about those players you stash away in the offseason. And Jeremy McNichols is interesting now that he's been called up. Maybe he'll get some more looks, speaking of evaluating players. But if this offense comes together the way it looks like it might around Garoppolo, then all the value in the 49ers offense go up. And on that note, how much do we trust Marquise Goodwin? Because you're saying you're sold on Garoppolo, and one of the things that can mess with you in week 15 is whether to buy in these late breaking trends in the NFL. And actually, what's awesome is that Marquise Goodwin is only like 216 yards away from a 1,000-yard season. You can believe that. And kudos to San Francisco for getting a lot more out of him than Buffalo did, although he stayed healthy. So where does Marquise Goodwin? I'll frame this for you, Matt, by looking at my rankings. Okay, where I have Marquise Goodwin, where I have him projected right now, some of the wide receivers right above him are Doug Baldwin, Devontae Adams, Jarvis Landry, Josh Gordon. Some of the wide receivers right below him, D.D. Westbrook, who I'm sure we're getting a lot of questions about this week, Cooper Kupp, Larry Fitzgerald, Golden Tate. Am I overrating him because of what he's done in those 2 weeks with Jimmy Garoppolo?
No, not at all. And I think that he's done it. He was doing it before Jimmy Garoppolo came into the lineup. And that's what is really the selling point, is that he's making plays in tight coverage. in the middle of the field. And when you're making plays in the middle of the field, that means that you can run a diversified route tree. And that was something that he did show at Texas. And I remember watching him at the Senior Bowl, and everybody was really happy with him at the Senior Bowl. The only issue I really ever had with him, and I felt people were kind of overrating him a bit, was that he dropped the ball with impending contact coming with certain routes in the middle of the field. And he still does that occasionally, but he's more than just a fly route runner. So
yeah, he's not just a straight line guy.
No, not at all. And he's played tough, and Garoppolo's getting the ball there where it needs to be, and he's giving him opportunities where he doesn't have to make as many of the tough plays. It's just the efficient plays. So, yeah, I feel good about him there. And I would, I could argue with you either way about any of the 5 players above or below, well, 4 to 5 players above or below him, and say, here's the merits of either, but he belongs in that group.
Yeah, they can just connect with it for a touchdown instead of setting up a Robbie Gould field goal. But it is not crazy to buy into someone that I'm sure was not drafted in any typical fantasy draft. And I actually wrote him up for Bleacher Report back in 2013, Matt. And I had his strengths down as obviously speed, but he also changed speeds in his routes very well to create separation on short and intermediate routes. Adjusted to the ball well, tracked it over his shoulder. Not a shrinking violet. As far as his own physicality, but his ball tracking, route running, getting releases and all those things were still pretty raw. But when you have that amazing speed that he has, that's so Buffalo not making something out of him that San Francisco. Go ahead.
But then again, let's look at all the receivers who've left Buffalo.
Right. Robert Woods.
And all the ones that have come into Buffalo and how they've performed.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
Should tell you all you need to know about Buffalo's offense and staff right now.
Well, there was a really good point from one Joe Goodberry. I know you like Joe's work. I love Joe's work. And Joe and I'm going to say this mentoring that I did work at Bleacher Report for a couple of years as one of their lead draft analysts, and I was really happy for the opportunity. Anytime you can get paid to do draft work, it's a beautiful thing, because we just get to watch players and give our opinions, write about it, and call that work. But they put together a tremendous team of football minds on the BR1000 project. Justice,
Mark
Schofield, Charles McDonald, I think Marcus Mosier, just so many
Brandon Thorne.
So I mean, whoever it is that is helping tab people, like identifying the talent, the writing talent, the football minds, they're doing a tremendous job.
Good job, Doug Farrar.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. That makes so much sense. So he was just saying that he's noticed watching, because Joe Goodberry's breaking down wide receivers for them, that he's noticed. And by the way, I loved your impassioned plea that pro scouts and position coaches should be voting on all pros. I'll give you room for that rant one of these days. Right. But he said he's noticed that wide receivers with inaccurate quarterbacks come out of their breaks with no confidence, searching for the football, expecting a pass they have to adjust to. And, like he was talking about Robert Woods, jumping for a pass that he didn't need to. And then receivers, and of course, I think that works the opposite way. When you expect the ball to be there on time and your quarterback is going to hit you, put the ball, like when the wide receiver is where he expects to be, the quarterback throws with more confidence. When the quarterback throws more accurately, the wide receiver runs the route with more confidence, and it just builds on itself in both directions. And
Lance Zierlein used to joke around that he was talking about Ethan Carter, who was also a favorite of mine, a tight end for the Bengals, who's a third string tight end there. And he said Ethan Carter's going to be awfully surprised when he gets to the NFL and actually gets accurate passes where they're supposed to be on his routes. Right. And that was a big reason why he dropped a lot of passes, because he had to make a lot of crazy adjustments in Nebraska.
Odell Beckham Jr. Like why some of those things were masked on Odell Beckham's college tape. Zach Mettenberger, everybody. But lots of things in my notes about Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry that adjust well to poorly thrown balls. Go Canes 2001 asks, he's thinking about benching AJ Green for DD Westbrook.
Wow.
Now AJ Green is playing Minnesota. And one of the things I've been harping on this week, Matt, is the idea of when you start a quarterback, you're starting his weapons, an offensive line to an extent. When you start a wide receiver, you're starting his quarterback. So you're getting Andy Dalton in your lineup. Or you're getting Blake Bortles, which isn't as bad as it sounds. But is this crazy?
It's not crazy, but it's a little nutty. I will, if we can make the different,
Yeah.
a little bit of a delineation there, because here's the thing. AJ Green, his worst game all year was 1 for 6, and that was because he got in a fight with Ramsey
Right.
in Jacksonville. And yes, he had a 27-yard day, but he scored, and that was against the Colts, which I don't think that was a huge issue there. But most of the time, his worst days are like 50, 60 yards and a score, or he'll have 80, and when you look at D.D. Westbrook, that's a good day from D.D. Westbrook right now. He's
Yeah.
not getting those deep routes the way Keelan Cole's getting them. He's getting the third down fade routes, and he's getting the more high-end difficulty type of targets, which is a compliment to him, but it's not really a great thing for fantasy owners compared to him getting those difficult targets the way AJ Green's going to get them, and then the deep vertical shots as well. So maybe he'll bust out and give you that this week, and you'll be lucky if that happens. But I think if you're looking at it from the standpoint of saying what's the floor and what's the ceiling, and who has one or the other or both, AJ Green has both, and I think you got to go with him.
Yeah, matchup, etc. You play AJ Green, and it's not that. And again, I have D.D. Westbrook in my top 20 wide receivers this week, so I'm pro
Yeah.
D.D. Westbrook, but not over the likes of AJ Green. I don't care what the matchup is. I don't even know if I care who the quarterback is.
And AJ Green is a more. Here's the thing: Marvin Jones didn't beat up on Xavier Rhodes, but he played pretty well. He held
Yeah.
his own well enough to get some plays against him. Marvin Jones is a tricky, kind of smarter. Richard Sherman talked about it in an article today in the Players Tribune, saying, "Here are the 5 most underrated receivers that I've faced." And he mentioned Marvin Jones as one of them because he's so crafty as a route runner, but more physical than you'd expect to be able to get that last minute separation. That's AJ Green's game. AJ Green's game is that as well. He's a wiry, strong player who can also win the ball, and he's got that speed. So I think Xavier Rhodes will be in for a pretty good fight, because let's face it. I mean, I like Julio Jones, and Julio Jones is a terrific wide receiver. But, even though Julio Jones is a bigger guy, stronger guy, if you were to tell me, pick the receiver between those two that's going to take the tough hit that Eric Berry's going to like be screaming down from over top and nail you while you have someone hanging on your back and you're going to get hit in the chest to catch a ball 30 yards downfield, who would you rather have? I'll take AJ Green because he actually did that against Eric Berry in Tennessee and Steelers games. Just watch some old Steelers games with him doing that, riddling the Steelers defense who hit him. AJ Green, unless the defender's coming to hit him in the back, if he can't see the hit, he catches it. If he sees the hit, he still drops the ball. And to me, when I look at AJ Green in that situation, that just tells you he's a little more matchup proof, even with difficult matchups.
Yeah, you go down with AJ Green in your lineup. Now, one that I posed when I was talking to Evan Silva on the couch this week, Matt, where I go the other way, and I think this is one of the more hotly debated players of Week 15. Now, if it's D.D. Westbrook or Mike Evans, I'm going with D.D.
Whew, yeah, and I think that has to do with both Evans' play and his quarterback.
Jameis Winston, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that your rule there, what you're talking about in terms of dictated that you're getting the quarterback as well as the receiver. Yeah, he did have, he had 12 targets, against Atlanta and 6 for 78, but Jameis wasn't back then, and so you're looking at this. The run game seems to be kind of in transition right now. Atlanta's playing with some confidence lately. They won a tough battle, and you saw some good play from Desmond Trufant. I think you're right. I think that this is a riskier one because Westbrook's going to get fewer targets most likely than Evans, but I think Westbrook has a shot to have an equal to higher impact per target. So I can understand it.
It's a better matchup. In that game against Atlanta, Ryan Fitzpatrick did very little until Trufant went out. And then in the second half, and also Atlanta was well ahead in that game. Now, Atlanta could jump out to the same kind of lead in Tampa, but I have a feeling it's going to be more of a Devontae Freeman and hopefully Peyton Barber show on Monday night. And I think that if you're struggling with a decision with Mike Evans, then go with the other player, because we look at trends, and this has come up a lot in the last week on different shows I've done, that I think you and I might have even talked about this. You don't bet on a trend to reverse in week 15. Maybe you
Right.
mess around with stuff like that maybe in the regular season for fantasy, but at this point, you trust the way that some things will reverse. There are some things that will reverse, but unless you have a real good narrative, a player coming back from injury or some players out that are making the matchup a lot easier. And that's the thing about Westbrook, just to put a fine point on this. Receivers like Westbrook now with better quarterbacks, but receivers like Westbrook. Well, actually, T.Y. Hilton didn't have a better quarterback. He had 5 for 175 and 2 touchdowns, but Paul Richardson had 2 touchdowns and over 100 yards. Brandon Cooks had 2 touchdowns and over 100 yards.
Guys who win the ball.
And guys who can get behind the defense,
Yeah. And you make such a great point about the trends, because the first 4 weeks of the season is when you don't pay attention to trends. That's where everyone's going up and down and tilting over what happened one week to the next. That's where I think we often recommend just stay the course the first 4 weeks to see how things stack up, and then start making your moves, in terms of your lineup decisions. But at this point, yeah, you may luck out with your lineup choice, but I don't know. To me, it's like Kareem Hunt. I made the wrong call on Kareem Hunt last week, saying, he's probably a guy you're going to want to bench again, after saying he should continue not to be regarded that way. But I can sleep well at night when you look at the decision-making process you take, because sometimes, when you look at things like this, when you evaluate, you want to evaluate by saying, are you going to evaluate assuming a positive, or are you going to evaluate assuming prove it to me? And I think that in a performance-based business, you have to evaluate saying, prove it to me before I give you the benefit of the doubt.
So you mentioned the Players Tribune, by the way, and I love the series they've been doing at the Players Tribune of the 5 toughest matchups. When you hear players eloquently talk about, I like even the framing that they've done. AJ Green's framing was fantastic when he wrote his about different things that I can't remember what it was, like some sort of dancing or singing thing he did before when he was a kid, and then he gave it up for football or something. Anyway. It's wonderful stuff. And actually, one of our part of our speaking of the Football Guys family, Isaac Lake, or I'm sorry, Isaac, I really want to say Light, because Lake means light. He actually does work for the Players Tribune and helps contribute to helps these pieces jump off the screen the way they do for us. And he's got a question. I think this is another one of the most talked about players of Week 15. And Matt, we put ourselves out there as fantasy football experts, so we have to make these calls, and this one revolves around Aaron Rodgers, and there's a lot of calls around Aaron Rodgers this week. And unlike track records and trends we have for other players, we don't have a track record or a trend for Aaron Rodgers right now. And he's matched up at Carolina. And the other side of this, and Dak Prescott is a third choice in this one, but I think we can toss Prescott out, because it's Aaron Rodgers or Phillip Rivers.
Yeah, and that is a great tough choice decision.
I have them ranked right next to each other in my rankings.
Yeah, and I think that the thing is that when you look at this scenario, if I'm going to judge this, I mean, Carolina has certainly given up its share of yards to quarterbacks in recent weeks, and Keenum and Breeze and McCown, and you've seen some good play out of that. But at the same time, you wonder how much Rodgers is going to, are we expecting we want to expect Rodgers to just go off like the gunslinger he is, and like the way that Brian Bakhtiari shows the dragon from Game of Thrones, plowing the landscape with the, kind of burning it up and saying, Aaron Rodgers is back, and that's all fine and well, and that's fun, but how much are they going to lean on a run game that's been working for them and winning games, even though they're close? Run game team, run offenses generally create close game scenarios, so that's, sometimes you go, oh, well, they were barely winning. Well, the run game tends to be that way. With Aaron Rodgers, you're going to get smarter decisions in addition to that. So maybe they play a little bit more balanced than what we've seen in the past with that run game against Carolina. I think that if you're the way I look at it is this: if you can sleep well at night, being a little bit more upside oriented, you go with Aaron Rodgers, because he's probably going to score one on the ground and he might throw 2 or 3 touchdowns. Because he can basically run around and create messes for defenses that they can't cover. But if you're more conservative leaning and say, look, I don't want to kick myself for making a call that I knew wasn't that logical, the more logical call is Phillip Rivers.
I think it is more logical. It's the safer call, because there's at least 3 risk factors with Rodgers. There's the Carolina matchup, which was very tough for Case Keenum last week. Even though he put up the numbers, he did it through sheer will and play. There's the layoff and the potential for rust. And I think there's the potential that he takes a hit on that shoulder that makes him feel a little off or a little sore, as he hasn't had any contact on. It's going to be in the game. And, this is a hugely important game for both of these teams.
And
Go ahead.
I got to say this because I think the three of us will appreciate this, Isaac as well. Wish Isaac a happy Hanukkah. And in my house, when we celebrate Hanukkah, we say the prayer, and my wife wants to learn the prayer. So I got to say this because she'll probably be laughing at knowing this, but she mispronounces some of the words like a lot of American Jews do when they're saying the prayers, and haven't said them very often. But my wife does that. And I knew she was definitely the one for me when she mispronounced Lahad Likner as Lahad McNair. So Lahad McNair is like our little joke on Hanukkah. So Isaac Lahad McNair.
Perfect. Okay. So, and I agree with you that Rodgers, I liked your general assessment, and that's how I thought of it putting together my rankings, that Rodgers represents upside, but lower floor. And that could help you make the call because there's some really close calls. One, I think Tom Brady's not a close call. Russell Wilson's not a close call. You're playing them. I don't think Ben Roethlisberger is too. I think what we've seen from Roethlisberger, the matchup, unless the weather, I'll say asterisk weather, because it is in Pittsburgh in December. But if the weather isn't foreboding, I think Roethlisberger over Rodgers is an easy call, like in 100% of the cases. You agree?
I'd agree. Absolutely agree. He played great. And, I was talking about this in the top 10 earlier this week. Baltimore at the end of that game, they were like, we know that Brandon Carr has been beat by Antonio Brown throughout this game, but it's 3rd and 5. You have one play left. We're going to go ahead and put him on Antonio Brown again. And a lot of people go, well, that's stupid. But to me, I thought it was actually very smart because you have a chance of hitting a 5-yard pass, and we're going to cover everything underneath, and we're going to make you hit the low percentage throw, even though it's the best receiver in the league, because we're like, look, we're going to make you do it because we'd rather not get bled slowly down the field. We'd either like to stop this right now and win the game, or we're going to let you, or you're going to hit this pass that's a lower percentage play and win the game. And that's what happened. Put up or shut up. And Ben Roethlisberger did that. And when you see the connection he has with Antonio Brown, I think Steelers Depot has probably put some stuff out pretty recently about that connection. That's fantastic that I can't wait to read.
Oh, it's wonderful. And be still my beating heart, Matt. Cody Latimer just made a play in the end zone and caught a touchdown. It finally happened.
He trapped it to his chest and everything. I mean, like, man, that professor I knew at UGA who said, he's like, oh, you work at football, guys? Oh, yeah. I just never understood why you guys like Cody Latimer. But, I love Chase Stewart's work. He was definitely a statistician guy. So, Tom, if you're out there, yeah. Hey.
Yeah.
So,
Chase, and I love Chase Stewart's work, too. I love Chase Stewart. Free agent next year. Who knows? Who knows what'll happen? I know that Peyton Manning destroyed his confidence. So that's what's going on in that game is Brock Osweiler's playing well and trying to make himself more than the league minimum next year as a backup somewhere. Or maybe back up in Denver. Michael McNair, speaking of Ben Roethlisberger. Michael McNair. See, the universe is winking at us tonight.
Yep, that's right.
He asks, and this is perfect. This has so much alliteration. It's almost poetic, Matt. Dede or Juju?
Yes. Oh, that's great. And I think the thing is, do we know for sure Juju's going to play?
Well, that's the thing. He's got the hamstring, and this is where we could have Dr. Gene come in. But let's assume that if he has a limited practice, if he's questionable, then that makes it easy. But so to make this question more interesting, let's assume he has a full practice tomorrow, and it's kind of like Robbie Anderson last week. Not that turned out okay, where it's like it was just a minor little hiccup, and you treat him the way you normally would.
Well, to be cute about it, there's good juju and bad juju. I don't know if there's good DD or bad DD yet, so we're going to just go with DD. But I think the real rationale behind that is that, the Steelers can spread the ball a little bit more around. I think New England's a little trickier in the middle of the field in a way that maybe that will be more difficult for Juju Smith-Schuster. And I think that with Westbrook, that that Bortles already has the confidence to go to him in situations that are reserved for a veteran. When you see those plays we just described, usually quarterbacks are too afraid to do that for a while. It took Russell Wilson. A lot of it was Paul Richardson's injuries, but it still took Russell Wilson a full season last year and part of this year to go, oh, you know what? I know in practice, Paul Richardson's making these plays against Richard Sherman like left and right on these tight coverage plays, but I'm not sure I'm ready to do that yet. And he throws those things up there for him all the time now. But it took a while. Bortles is like, forget that. I'm throwing up to him right now. He's got that, he's got that confidence in him. So I would stick with it.
Yeah, I would too. And I like Juju this week if he was okay, but there's the hamstring casts a little bit out over him. And I like it because Martavis Bryant and Ben Roethlisberger just aren't riffing. But if Juju's dinged and Martavis Bryant is then the number 2 receiver again, maybe that's another Jesse James day. I don't know. Or just a lot of, or 25 completions to Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown. Let's go with that. Yeah. Let's go with that. And Michael McNair also asked in a 0.5 PPR, Golden Tate, Doug Baldwin, or Marquise Goodwin?
Ooh, yeah. I think that when you look at this scenario, I still got to go with Baldwin. I just think that Baldwin is one of those guys that you never think of him as a top 12 receiver, but he really is in spirit. You stick with him as that option. Golden Tate's not that far behind for me. I just think that, but at the same time, he's less reliable. Baldwin's a guy that at worst, he's going to give you a reasonable day. So I would do that.
So this is how close I have them in my projections. Okay. We've got Goodwin coming in at 12.1, Golden Tate coming in at 12.4, and Doug Baldwin coming in at 12.2. And so they're that close in the projections. And I would also give, so the one data point I think doesn't reflect the wide range. And but I would say that the rankings reflect, I think that Golden Tate has a higher floor. I think Golden Tate is more likely to give you 10 to 12 points as a floor because he's going to catch 6-7 passes against Chicago. It's for 50 or 60 yards. I think that Marquise Goodwin probably, because the touchdowns aren't there, don't give you the ceiling. Also has roughly that 80-yard 5-catch or 60, 70-yard 5-catch floor. I'm not sure if he has a lot more ceiling. Golden Tate has more touchdown potential. Doug Baldwin has the highest ceiling.
Yeah.
But Doug Baldwin also in recent weeks has given us lines like 2 for 40. Yeah. So he has a lower floor. So I would say you look at your matchup. If you're an underdog, you play Baldwin. If you're a favorite, you play Tate. With no other information, I would say it would be Golden Tate because of the floor. But that's because at this time of year, I try to be very true to my projections. If my projections say that, then I'll think about this, and maybe tomorrow I may change it and move Tate down.
I can get with that. I can totally see that. But the thing with Baldwin too is when you look at Baldwin, I mean, I guess the thing that you look with him that's nice is that as long as they can get a little bit of protection there, he's a guy that can pick you apart in the short game, but he's going to get his deep shots, like you said. So, yeah, I totally see the upside with that. But those other guys are so close enough. They're close enough that the way that you played out is good.
So I may have to think about that because my gut is saying Baldwin. I mean, my gut is saying the answer is Baldwin. But it's not clear. I wouldn't talk you out of any other options. And then Gina Carter asked Westbrook and Goodwin, and again, Westbrook and Goodwin are right next to each other in my projections. I actually have them 0.1 points apart. But I still, but I have them 0.1 point apart with Goodwin ahead in standard. But I have Westbrook projected for more catches because he's been converting more. He's been converting those targets into catches.
I think the better quarterback and the better matchup is for Goodwin, and so that's the safer play.
Yeah. I think the Goodwin is the safer play. I just have this thing about Westbrook this week and how Houston has been playing and how Bortles has been throwing. But
I'm with you.
These are tight.
Listen, I mean, I think in 2 years, D.D. Westbrook at 19 is going to be low for him on a weekly basis.
Yeah. Assuming that Bortles is okay or whatever they've got going on there, but these are tight. And the thing is, you can tell, and I've been noticing this on the start sit. The start sit segments I do around the country. That was close to a sorry Joe.
It was the start shiv.
Exactly.
That's what you said. Yes.
But the questions this week are really hard because if your team is still alive and you're in the semifinals, you're probably pretty good at fantasy football. And if you're the people that are calling in and asking the questions, they really are tough calls. They really are calls that usually they're within a few spots in my rankings. And I really do, when I think about it, if I give a different answer than what my projections say, I go back and make an adjustment. I want to go back and I want to go back and talk more about Aaron Rodgers. And I want to talk about other quarterbacks that we may weigh, because we, as a jumping off point, we had Ben Roethlisberger over him. Let's also weigh Aaron Rodgers against the quarterback that he's facing, Cam Newton.
Yeah, I mean, when you look
And
at
this is where you're
Cam,
going to say, meh.
yeah, I'm pretty much, because I've just been that way about Cam all year, and I like Cam Newton as a player overall, long term, but it's hard for me to get with him when he hasn't thrown for a 200-yard game
No.
in 4 weeks. You know, the last one was 4 weeks ago, 254, and then he had two more subpar 160 games, you know, before, you know, his last 200-yard game there. So basically, the last time he's thrown for anything that you would say is good fantasy production was week 5 against Detroit. So, you know, it's more about rushing yards and rushing touchdowns, but you know, he's safe from a touch factor because he gets so many touches. You're going to get some points out of him. It's just that his ceiling is really very much touchdown dependent.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing recently that they're varying things up in the run game, that he's not the automatic touchdown scorer from the red zone. They're balancing, putting formations out there with 3 tight ends or 3 or 4 linemen extra, and then they're running it to Jonathan Stewart, or then they're doing things with McCaffrey. And I just think about that. And the part of that's because Olsen's been out. You know, they don't have their red zone option in terms of the guy that everyone's going to look to first. So, Osweiler scoring on a big play here. It looks like downfield. I don't even know who that was, but let's see. 67-yard, 3-play, 67 yards. But anyway, you know, when I look at this, I just think that the guy that you have to consider here more is Rodgers, just because, you know, even at worst, Rodgers has similar rushing ability. Wow, that was a nice skinny post by Osweiler. He hits number 82. I think that might be Taylor.
Sunshine?
Yeah, it might be Sunshine.
I'm
No,
behind.
that's
I'm actually behind you in the game.
Oh, okay. It's Hireman. So Jeff Hireman on a skinny post from the outside, and he just threaded that thing. He's like celebrating like there's no tomorrow, but that's a really nice play, and they're going to go for 2 at this particular juncture. But yeah, Rodgers to me is a safer call just because he's got better weapons on the outside that he knows. Jordy Nelson will suddenly be activated, you know, not just on the field activated, but activated as an actual target now that Brett Hundley's out. And I think you'll just see them spread the ball around a little bit more, and he may play a little bit more within himself, but I think that he's still going to make some of those plays that we go, oh, well, that's why he's Aaron Rodgers. So yeah, I'd go for that.
That's fair. And I'll do the counterpoint. Okay,
please.
Here's the counterpoint. And I think you're right to say that Cam Newton is touchdown dependent. But we can look at Cam Newton last week. And Cam Newton last week was maybe like a 16, 17 point play. And it was against Minnesota. So I think so first of all, it's a matchup that you tend to see quarterbacks be on the lower end of their range possibilities. As you said, in the red zone, 2 short yardage rushing touchdowns went to Jonathan Stewart. Instead of, when there's 2 short yardage rushing touchdowns that the Panthers produce, at least one of them is probably going to go to Newton. You know, against New Orleans, they got beat, and McCaffrey had 1 receiving touchdown, and Stewart had 1 rushing touchdown. To reflect what you're talking about, against the Jets, Newton scored 1, and Stewart scored 1. Against Miami, which was when Cam Newton went crazy, throwing for 4 touchdowns and rushing for 95 yards. He didn't have any of the rushing touchdowns. Actually, McCaffrey had 2. And then against Atlanta, McCaffrey had 1 rushing touchdown, and Newton had a rushing touchdown. So it seems like every week the Panthers are producing 2 red zone touchdowns to divvy up. So that gives you the possibility of Newton giving you 15 points on the ground alone. And you know from how things have gone, the last week that Newton rushed, so Newton's rushing for most weeks 50-plus yards. Going back to week 6, he had 71 and a touch, 50, 44, 86 and a touch, 95, 28 and a touch, 51, and 70. So he's giving you roughly, I mean, if you threw all those numbers and had averaged it out, an 8 to 10 point floor as a runner, you know. Maybe it'll only be 4 or 5. Maybe it'll be 15. But and then I'm just not impressed with Green Bay's pass defense at all right now. They gave up 3 touchdowns to Kaiser last week. They gave up 2 to Jameis Winston. They gave up 4 to Roethlisberger. And I just don't see them now. But you bring up a point that gives me pause when you say, well, who does he have to throw to? Greg Olsen, Devin Funchess. But we did see Demarius Randall actually do a pretty good job on Josh Gordon last week. Jameer Byrd, Christian McCaffrey, who is not used that creatively or interestingly as a downfield receiver. So you're right, 150, 170. I mean, I think that even my projection for Cam Newton this week is 188 passing yards.
And that may be high, which is odd to say that, but compared to recent years, but that's a tough call. I'll
give you the one other factor that as I'm thinking it through, the one other factor I think that helps Cam Newton's outlook is that Aaron Rodgers is back, right? Mm-hmm. That there's more likelihood of him having to make some plays and put the offense on his shoulders. But that's where so I think we've established, though, that after those 3, Wilson, Brady, and Roethlisberger, that you could have Rodgers slated 4th. Yeah. Because the next quarterbacks in my rankings, Matt, are, and I'll just throw these all to lump them all together: Case Keenum, Matthew Stafford, Drew Brees. Keenum's playing Cincinnati, the depleted Cincinnati defense, at home. Stafford's playing at home against Chicago. Drew Brees playing at home against the Jets. I have all 3 of them ahead of Aaron Rodgers, acknowledging that if we did a range of possibilities, Aaron Rodgers' range of possibilities tops out at a higher point than Keenum or Brees or Stafford, but his floor is lower than their floor.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point we're splitting hairs. This is a hair splitting exercise for all of these players, because we all know, in a reality football standpoint, the only player that we could argue is as good as Aaron Rodgers is Drew Brees. But and I'm not talking fantasy wise, just skill wise. That's one where that you could have a debate. But Keenum and Stafford are good football players with good surrounding talent. They've got strong receivers. And Keenum's got that offensive line, even with some injuries, has still been treating him pretty well. So when you look at it from that scenario, the matchup scenario, those guys certainly could give you 300, 350-yard days, 2-3 touchdown days. But again, from a skill standpoint, on top of that, Aaron Rodgers is a guy that the only other guy that can create as well as Aaron Rodgers in the passing game with or without an offensive line is Russell Wilson. Yeah. Those are the 2 guys that you just say they're basically the mutants in the, on the football field, then there aren't many of them. Roethlisberger used to be that mutant. He's just gotten a little older. He's Logan now, I guess. So, you look at it.
Deshaun Watson looked like one.
Deshaun Watson looked like one. Yes. So, when you look at it from that standpoint, it's all very close, and I wouldn't blame anyone for choosing somebody over Rodgers when it comes to Keenan, Stafford, or Brees. But at the same time, I couldn't argue with you if you just said, no, I'm taking Rodgers. He's back. I'm good with that.
So that's it. And I think that's the cutoff. Those 9 quarterbacks, including Rivers, who we talked about earlier, that's the cutoff. And then I think there's a drop to the next tier.
Yeah.
And the next tier is like Bortles and Alex Smith and Jared Goff and Matt Ryan and guys you're much less excited about.
Yes.
Both in terms of floor and in terms of ceiling. Rami asks, Robert Woods, can we trust Robert Woods in our lamps this week, or will he break our holiday spirit? Going up to Seattle, the depleted Seattle defense. Now, we did see Chris Hogan come back last week in a good matchup. He had 8 for 74 and a touchdown the last time Gronkowski was out. He caught 1 pass, and the whole New England offense collapsed. Brandon Cooks was an even bigger disappointment. So do we have some first week back caution? Some of this depends on what you feel about the complexion of this matchup at Seattle. Last time out against Seattle, I think Woods had like 5 for 60, 5 for 66, something like that. But I think the offense has grown up since then. Robert Woods obviously went on a tear after that. So without any other context, are you considering Robert Woods this week?
I would consider Robert Woods this week, and it would also be one of those scenarios where you go, are you behind or are you ahead? If you're ahead, you play the more conservative role. But if you're behind, I would actually consider Robert Woods as kind of that sneaky, I'm scared, people are scared to play him, but you should, because the thing about Jared Goff that makes him so good is that he's a timing quarterback. He's a good, he's a guy that will fit the ball in there. When the guy's open, he's going to target him. He reads defense as well. The way that this offense is set up, you're going to see him, look at the way that he was targeting Watkins and Josh Reynolds when Josh Reynolds came in as a rookie, and he's making some big plays here and there, and he's going to, and when you look at that scenario, or you look at that he's hitting Gerald Everett, a rookie tight end, and Higbee for big plays, it doesn't matter who's in there. He's finding those guys. So to me, Robert Woods being the best route runner of the bunch, probably, I would say he is, just maybe slightly ahead of Cooper Kupp at this stage because he's a veteran and he's always been a good route runner. And he's got some of that deep ability that we didn't see as much in Buffalo. You could see some big plays out of this, especially considering that Seattle had a healthy defensive secondary when they played last time. So, I could see this being a bigger game than people expect. It's riskier. It's, he's got a much lower floor because you could make the counter argument that, well, Cooper Kupp's playing well, Sammy Watkins is playing well. They're not going to need Woods as much. And so if Woods starts off a little slow, then that could be, a death knell for your fantasy team when you start him. But if you're in a situation where you're down by a big amount and you don't have anybody who's like a huge boom bust play to start in instead, and you're looking at like Golden Tate as your option, you might look at Robert Woods and go, well, let me swing for the fences here.
Yeah, and I agree with you that if we're looking for shootouts or games that have that shootout potential that gives you a little nudge, well, break ties in favor of players in this game, that's absolutely one. We've seen the Rams play a shootout game against San Francisco. We saw the Rams play a shootout game last week against Philly. We've seen Russell Wilson play a shootout game against Houston up there in Seattle. So I believe that these are all good reasons to at least consider Woods. Brian Sumner asks Dede or Tyreek, and I think this is one. As much as I love Dede, it's Tyreek. I don't have to think about it. You're putting Tyreek Hill in your lineup in the semifinal. Yeah, what he's all those Tyreek Hill questions of the offseason have all gone away. Nathan B, we talked about Rodgers and Rivers at the top of the show, and I think we agreed that the answer there is Rodgers, although Rivers is the safer play. And Gina, I think we had a split decision on Dede versus Goodwin. I think I depending on your scoring, I would probably, if it's PPR, go with Dede, but we won't talk you out of Goodwin. Some talk about Carson Wentz. Spencer talking about how he had Carson Wentz and had Rodgers, and he thought he was going to have a tough matchup. A tough choice between Rodgers and Wentz, and well, now he doesn't. Those people that had Carson Wentz and have to go to the waiver wire this week, okay, I'll toss out some names, and I'm going to toss them out in the order I have them in my rankings. All right. Okay. I think the clear number one, if he's out there, is Blake Bortles. And you have to wait to hear the other names. Okay. I think it's possible he's out there because of the Blake Bortles reputation. Actually, my number two is Deshaun Kaiser, the way that they're playing. And some of the names I'm not including in here that are in my rankings in between these players, like Alex Smith and Jared Goff and Matt Ryan, Jameis Winston. I don't expect they're out there. So I'd go Bortles, Kaiser against Baltimore, Joe Flacco against Cleveland. I actually have Kaiser a little higher because of the running ability and because of how this pass offense has changed. I have Nick Foles next. Nick Foles is kind of that boring 15 to 18 point option against the Giants. I expect a lot of Jay Ajayi in that game. So I got Bortles, Kaiser, Flacco, Foles, then Jimmy Garoppolo. Even though as much as I like Jimmy Garoppolo, it's resulting in a ton of field goals. And then I just want to have as an honorable mention, if you're in a league where people have been really savvy and all of these quarterbacks are owned already, Mitchell Trubisky against Detroit. Interesting. So what do you think about Carson Wentz replacements on the waiver wire this week?
Yeah, it's good. Looking at that, I agree with you with Bortles is certainly a nice play. I'm higher on Garoppolo than you. I think that he's going to have a 300-yard day. Will he score touchdowns? That's the question. Like you said, I think he'll be good for one. What you want is 2 or 3. And that's where you could see where this gets tight because, Kaiser, Flacco, they could have really strong days. Kaiser's an interesting one that I want to talk about because, everyone's freaking out over the throw that he made where he threw the ball up for grabs at the end of the game. And, Charles McDonald was talking about that going like, what was he thinking? That kind of thing. And certainly we've seen that. I know Mike Vick did it all the time, but we didn't talk about what was he thinking on that level. Brett Favre, but and Eli Manning still, but to me, it's funny that Deshaun Kaiser's getting treated like he's a 10-year veteran doing this, when 10-year veterans who did it, nobody was making a big deal out of it. But it is also interesting that John Dorsey's basically saying we need to find a new quarterback right away, and these aren't real players that are being picked. You almost wonder if this is the old school, let's see how he responds kind of thing, that we're going to get. And maybe Kaiser will respond on that level. Then again, the Notre Dame coach tried to do that, and that didn't quite work out so well either. So
trade him to Pittsburgh. Trade
him
Kaiser to Pittsburgh, please.
Yeah, I bet maybe the Browns will take Joshua Dobbs. I mean, that would be fitting. But it would be funny if he ended up in Pittsburgh. I would I don't know. I don't think I could. I think I'd be forever trolling Browns fans. Browns fans are emotionally abused. They all need therapy.
Yes.
Yes. Trust me, I am one. So, but you look at it from the standpoint, Kaiser has the players, but you just wonder, he has Gordon, and Gordon should be able to beat anybody. But it's just a matter of how he's going to make smart decisions and how he's going to handle pressure. And I think the Ravens will be able to deliver pressure and to be able to do enough to confuse him with the way that they like to mix things up at the line of scrimmage, and to be able to kind of have these amorphous kind of defensive looks, to not give the rookie a firm read before the snap. So I don't like him as much as I like Garoppolo. I don't like him as much as I like Flacco, as 50-degree day Flacco is. Foles I like a little bit more because the Giants are horrible.
Yeah.
And Foles is a perfect example of a guy that, I've seen all these stats this week. Everyone's saying, oh, he has very low interception rate. And, oh, look at his season when he was good with the Eagles. That season when he was good with the Eagles, let me tell you something. He had more throws in the middle of the field while he was being hit. Yeah, we were talking about it.
I remember our conversations about it in the offseason. Like, did you go back and watch Nick Foles and see how much he got away with?
Yeah, he got away with murder. It was like, who was that back? Oh, Steve Slayton. Okay. I call this the Steve Slayton effect, because Steve Slayton was a great running back out of West Virginia, great scat back. But when he went to Houston, he had more runs where he spun out of a pile where the pile couldn't find him. And he was like just digging his legs into the back of a lineman. And then he somehow spun out and there was a free opening and he'd get big gains. And he had more of those in his rookie year than I'd ever seen from a running back. And everybody's talking about how great he was. And then we never saw him again, really, other than a short little time in Miami. And Foles had that same kind of thing where he was like that Packer game. I remember there was a Packer game where he threw a ball up to Riley Cooper that he had no business throwing that thing in the middle of the field, and it should have been an interception. And it was like a huge play. And he had like 5 or 6 of those plays in that. And he did that at Arizona. So the good thing is that just like Carson Wentz, who doesn't throw a great deep ball unless he runs around all over the place, is they're trying to do a lot of spread passing game type of stuff that's more controlled. And it's just kind of, dip the ball to the running back and then just flick it out there to the tight end, quick reads, that type of thing. And then if you need to buy time, good for you. You can make some plays. And Foles is kind of that player. So he's a good fit. He's kind of Carson Wentz light, in that way. So I could see him having a big day and people going, oh, we're going to be fine. And Jason Wood, feeling really good, on Monday after his dour prediction that, don't start anybody but Ertz, and him, we'll hear him a little bit more confident and hopeful, or he might say, oh, it was just the Giants. They stink. So we'll find out next week. I'm excited to stay tuned about Jason Wood's reaction.
For the whole Philadelphia. And, maybe this still ends up, you're right. I mean, if Philadelphia can just hold serve, get home field advantage, you only have to win 2 games to go to the Super Bowl, and anything can happen. They've got players on both sides of the ball. And I was playing around on 538. They have a nice playoff simulator where, you just check all the games, win losses, and see what happens. And Green Bay, despite a few good breaks with the schedule luck, like Carolina and Atlanta play each other, I was running all the scenarios, and they have to have Seattle lose to the Rams this week. That's hugely important for them because Seattle has 2 winnable games, or a team to lose a game that they shouldn't lose unexpectedly. But where I'm going with this is because if Aaron Rodgers doesn't make the NFC playoff bracket, and let's say we have a projected playoff bracket, and I'm just going to say this in terms of quarterbacks, okay? If we have a projected playoff bracket of Nick Foles, Case Keenum, Drew Brees, Cam Newton, Jared Goff and Russell Wilson would be the last one getting in. Wow, you expect hopefully Russell Wilson and Drew Brees wouldn't have to play each other the first weekend. But that would be so interesting if we had something like Wilson against Foles and Brees against Keenum, or something like that.
Yeah.
And if Aaron Rodgers isn't in there to muck it up, because when you look at it that way, all of a sudden you think, wow, if Green Bay can just sneak in the playoffs somehow, some way, then all of a sudden it becomes very interesting.
Yeah, it would be fun. I'd love nothing better than to see Russell Wilson find a way to beat Aaron Rodgers last second again, but
no.
But no, it would be a great matchup. And when you have Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs, that's a trump card that it's difficult to be able to overcome, just in the same way that the thing with Wilson, though, is you need to tell Wilson that he's down by 23 points and then he's unstoppable. But different scenarios there. And Cody Latimer keeps catching passes and he's making plays in tight coverage. It's like he's awake, for the first time in 5 years.
Well, Brock Osweiler looks like a starting NFL quarterback too. Brock Osweiler, this might be the best game we've seen Brock Osweiler play in his career. Yeah. That being said, it's against the Colts, who don't have their top 4 corners.
Yeah, and they're playing a lot of cover one, which means they're basically saying, here, one-on-one coverage against inexperienced guys, and you can read it. He's basically looking at the field and going, well, is the defender outside or inside? Oh, he's outside, and there's a deep safety, and the linebackers are playing up for the run game. Well, let's throw it over the middle. Yeah, that's basically what's happening all week.
It's the kind of stuff that Chris Sims was doing in Tampa, and it's almost like the Colts are still playing defense like they have Malik Hooker back there, which it'll be fun to watch when they have Malik Hooker back there. He ain't back there, so Brock Osweiler's making some things happen. We're making some things happen here, and I would say, parting thoughts, but Matt and I are going to be back Sunday morning.
That's right.
And we'll have some final updates from Dr. Gene on the injuries to look over. We'll talk about, again, some of these tougher decisions and wax philosophical, start to look ahead is same as it ever was. The AFC bracket, is it Roethlisberger or Brady? Every year, is it? I mean, especially with Peyton Manning out of there, is it Roethlisberger or Brady this year? And the NFC bracket, it could be anybody. Every week, every year, it's a different quarterback, a different team on that side of the bracket. But what's fun?
Maybe we could say it's Roethlisberger, Brady, or Fournette.
Yeah, exactly, the juggernaut, or Jalen Ramsey.
Yes.
But what's really fun is, I just want to throw this out there. And sorry to my good friend Rob Harling, who was the one who first told me about this site, Football Guys, back in 2000 or 2001, and all the Minnesota Vikings fans out there, because the Philadelphia Eagles fans are long-suffering, Minnesota Vikings fans are long-suffering. We could have an argument, a debate of who's more long-suffering. But the Super Bowl is in Minneapolis. So,
yeah.
If we're going to root for something, other than rooting for Jimmy Garoppolo to win this weekend, because we don't want Tennessee in the AFC part of it. We all win if Tennessee is not in the AFC side of the bracket. So, sorry.
I still have a soft spot for the Titans, but those flaming thumbtacks, but I hear you.
Well, don't you feel like, I was talking about this with Evan on the couch, don't you feel like the last 2 years of Marcus Mariota's career have shown that everybody who was bullish about him was right, and everybody who was bearish about him were also right? That we've seen in 2 years his strengths brought out and his shortcomings brought out by the same offense.
Yeah, and what to me, I was kind of more of I like him, but here's what his flaws are. Yeah. And you have to understand that, the problem is that a lot of people looked at Marcus Mariota and said he was this creative, masterful athlete who also could play unbelievably well from the pocket, when in fact what he was a terrific athlete who wasn't creative, who you had, when he's forced to be creative like Wilson and Rodgers, he fails miserably. He's not good at that. But if you say, run over here, fake the ball this way, and go in a straight line that way, he's great. When you ask him to play within the confines of what the task is, he's fantastic. But you need a supporting cast for him in the same way that Alex Smith needs a supporting cast for him, to maximize Alex Smith's athletic ability. He's not creative, and that's okay. Some people are really great at what they do but they're administrators of what the leadership wants them to do. And you put them within those bounds, they're great. Other guys, you're like, look, I'm going to tell this guy to do this 8 times or 10 times, and 9 times he's never going to do it the way I tell him to do it, but he's going to find a way to do it better probably 7 times out of 10, and I'll deal with the screw ups those 3 out of 10 times. Brett Favre, is a good example of that. Drew Brees is a good example of that, even in a way that it's more because even though he doesn't do the crazy things Brett Favre did, he does the daring things that a lot of quarterbacks wouldn't do. So it's a different leadership style, and you got to understand that people just didn't understand what he was about. And I think it's becoming clearer now to those who can get over the disappointment, that he wasn't the dream boy that they thought he was when they first started out.
Yeah, the truth is somewhere in between. The truth is always somewhere in between. And it's a great joy to get to do this with Matt, with Dr. Gene Bramall, with Cecil Lammy, and with all of y'all. So good luck, everybody, in your semifinals.
Yeah, good luck.
If you made it this far, you've done well, and just enjoy the way that it makes it a little more riveting, but also enjoy the way that you let go. You set the lineup and you let go, and just enjoy a football Saturday this week. Don't forget Chicago, Detroit, Kansas City Chargers. So
we got one this week.
Yeah,
we're going to semifinal. You and I are in.
Yeah, we're facing each other.
Yeah,
and we can talk about how that's going. We'll talk about how the Saturday night games on Sunday morning. We'll talk about that. We'll sit back and relax like we always do with special guests like the cat. My cat made it on the show this week, Matt. Whenever her boyfriend came to the door, and I'll have to pull up the real audio for that. Cecil's already made a drop out of it, and life going on, and it's beautiful to share this with everybody out there. So, thank you, everybody. We'll be back Sunday. Enjoy the Brock Osweiler show.